I still remember that night, the air cold enough to sting, the street lamps flickering over rain-damp sidewalks. I hadn't planned to stay out so late, but that's how quiet conversations and lingering eye contact work. They stretch time until the clock stops matching. He offered to walk me home. I said yes before thinking twice. It was late, after all, and he lived only a few blocks away from me. The streets were empty, the kind of empty that makes every footstep sound louder than it should. I hugged my coat tighter, and he fell into pace beside me. He wasn't saying much, but the silence didn't feel uncomfortable. It was heavy in a strange, expectant way, like we'd already said what mattered back at the cafe, and now the quiet was doing the rest of the talking. I kept glancing at him from the corner of my eye, catching how he'd look at the pavement instead of me every time I tried to meet his gaze. Before we begin, though, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps so much more than you think, and if you're already part of this little corner of stories, thank you for always coming back. Alright, let's start from where things shifted. When we reached my block, he slowed down but made no move to leave. I don't know why that made my pulse skip. Maybe because I had half expected him to stop at the corner like a polite goodbye should happen there. Instead, he followed as I climbed the steps to the porch. You can come in for a minute, I said softly, unlocking the door. It's freezing. He hesitated only a second, then nodded. Inside, the quiet was thicker than outside. I hadn't left any lights on, so I reached out to flick the switch, but he stopped me with a calm touch on my wrist. Leave it, he said. It's nicer like this. The only light came from the street, spilling in thin lines through the blinds. I stepped out of my shoes, trying to slow my heartbeat. He was watching me, not with intensity, not even curiosity, but something steadier. It made the room feel smaller. He took a seat on the edge of the couch like he was measuring the space between us. I sat down too, keeping a cushion of air that felt heavy enough to press against my chest. So, I started, but he shook his head gently. You don't have to talk. Those 4 words, soft, almost whispered, did something that conversation couldn't. The silence became a kind of agreement. My shoulders relaxed even as my pulse sped again. I leaned back. The couch creaked quietly. The rain had picked up outside, tapping softly on the windows. He looked toward the sound, then back at me. There was something unreadable in that look, a question, maybe. An invitation. That's when I heard the sound from inside the apartment. A door shifting somewhere down the hall. Just a faint click, but enough to pull me upright. I turned toward the hallway. Nothing. The living room lights were still off, the air still and calm, but my body tensed on instinct. He didn't move. Didn't even blink. It's okay, he said quietly, almost to himself. What do you mean, it's okay? I whispered. He stood up slowly, as if every movement had already been decided long before I'd asked the question. His voice stayed low. You said once that you hate doing things alone. I stared at him. What? Before I could form another word, 2 silhouettes appeared at the end of the hall. My hand went numb from surprise. For a second, I thought it was the shadow playing tricks, but no, the shapes were clear, real, breathing. My first thought was that I'd been set up. My second thought was that I wasn't scared, at least, not exactly. It was more like my nerves didn't know what to categorize. Adrenaline or intrigue, danger or drama. They're friends, he said softly, reading every flicker of my expression. They wanted to meet you. I wasn't sure if tonight would feel right. That's not, I began, but lost the rest, because they had stepped forward now, into the spill of dim light. And whatever words I'd been searching for fell apart on my tongue. One of them smiled, quiet and uncertain, like they weren't sure they belonged here either. The other just watched me carefully, their gaze steady but not invasive. Something about the stillness broke me out of the freeze. I took a slow breath, realizing my coat was still on, realizing I hadn't even processed how strange it was that no one seemed startled. He spoke again. You always talk about connection, he said softly, about people who understand you without needing to explain. I shook my head. That's different. That's not, whatever this is. It could be, he said. If you let it. The strange part is, I didn't move right away, though. I watched the 3 of them, 1 on the couch, 2 standing at the hall's mouth, and something inside me shifted from tension to curiosity. It wasn't the strangeness of being outnumbered. It was the realization that I'd been lonely in a room full of people before, and this felt oddly opposite. No one reached for me. No one pushed a step further. They just waited, silent, the air thrumming with unspoken possibility. You don't have to worry, said the taller stranger. We just came to listen. It was almost absurd, the gentleness of it. The rain had turned to wind against the windows, and every sound outside seemed far away, irrelevant. I sat back down slowly, heartbeat loud in my ears. The first man, my supposed escort, took a seat on the other side again, still watching me, waiting for me to decide. My throat felt dry, my hands too still, so, I said at last, quietly. What exactly are we listening to? He smiled, a faint one that didn't quite reach his eyes. To whatever you've been holding in too long. The others didn't interrupt. One of them closed the door behind, soft click. The other crossed arms loosely and leaned against the wall. No threat in any of it, just stillness and attention. It had been months since anyone had asked me to speak first. Somewhere between the fear and curiosity, I exhaled. Then I guess. I swallowed. I guess you'll be here a while. Time rearranges itself when you stop resisting it. A minute stretches, fractures, then folds back again until everything feels caught between heartbeat and breath. That's what it felt like in that room, like the clock had stepped out to give us privacy. I sank deeper into the couch. He stayed quiet beside me, his presence a steady pulse at my side. The two others were still standing, but the tension that had filled the hallway was softening, dissolving under the weight of simple calm talk. He murmured. Start anywhere. I almost laughed. That's the hardest instruction you could have given. He waited. The others did too. I took another breath. It's not easy to just start. People say they want truth but start flinching when you hand it to them. The taller of the two stepped forward. Then give it to us slowly. I looked up. You don't even know me. That's what makes it easier, he said. We're not here to judge you by who you were yesterday. That line landed somewhere between cliché and miracle. Maybe it was the tone, a hint that he meant it. For the first time in weeks, maybe months. I didn't feel like I had to filter myself. So I talked about the day that had gone wrong for no reason. About how I sometimes worried that being kind was misread as being weak. About how I filled silences with jokes just to keep people from noticing the weight behind them. The words came slow at first, then quicker. The room stayed still while I let them spill. He sat there listening, shoulders turned slightly so I could see he was really paying attention. The one who'd spoken earlier took a seat on the armchair. The third leaned near the window, watching the rain. When my voice shook, no one tried to fix it. They just listened. It's strange, the way that can feel. Like being stitched back together one thread at a time. I think, I murmured after a long pause. I was so sure I knew myself. But now I'm not even sure what I want from people anymore. He nodded slowly. Maybe that uncertainty's a good thing. Means you're open again. Something in his tone, slow, deliberate, made my chest loosen. I didn't realize how stiff I'd been sitting until that moment. The one by the window smiled faintly. You let people close only when they surprise you, don't you? I guess so. He tilted his head. Then let yourself be surprised tonight. I should have asked what he meant. But the way he said it, the calm, the care behind the words, made me trust the moment instead of dissecting it. What followed wasn't loud or cinematic. It was quiet and precise, small gestures that made the air shift. The couch creaked as someone moved closer. Fingers brushed mine just enough to remind me I was seen. I exhaled slowly, deeply. The warmth between bodies doesn't start from touch. It begins with permission. I hadn't realized I'd given it until it was already there. I think that's why the next part didn't feel forbidden. It felt inevitable. We didn't speak for several minutes. The silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. I could hear their breathing, the soft hum of rain, the occasional pulse of wind against the glass. The world had reduced itself to softness. He turned toward me, voice steady. You're trembling. I'm not scared, I said. I know. And I believed him. Simple as that. The rest of that night unfolded less like a scene and more like a slow rewiring. Every time someone spoke, the others listened. Every time I hesitated, a quiet voice encouraged me forward. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern forming between question and answer. Distance and closeness. It was confusing in the most calming way imaginable, like floating somewhere half-lit where the usual rules had taken the night off. At some point. Hours later maybe, I stood to get another blanket. My legs ached from sitting so long. I'd thought they might follow me down the hall, but only the first one did. His footsteps matched mine, soft, careful. When we reached the doorway, I turned to face him. The rain outside had finally stopped. The streetlight through the blinds painted long golden lines across his face. So, I whispered, was this always the plan? He smiled, patient. No. The only plan was to walk you home. The rest, he shrugged lightly, just felt right when it happened. I laughed quietly at that. You really think people just appear when you need them to? Sometimes, yes, he said. Sometimes we become those people for each other. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The others joined us again before long. We talked more, about small things this time, stories, memories, the kind of late-night silliness that only comes when you know you'll remember it tomorrow. Somewhere between laughter and exhaustion, I realized morning was creeping up on us. The sky outside was a deep violet when someone pointed to the window. It's almost dawn. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself. Feels like it can wait a bit longer. They stayed until the first light crawled across the floor. One by one, they said quiet goodbyes. Nothing grand, Just small acknowledgments that the night had done what it was supposed to do. He lingered the longest, standing by the door as I walked him out. "You okay?" he asked. "More than okay." He nodded. "Then maybe next time, you'll walk me home." I smiled at that, half shy, half amused. "Maybe I will." The door shut softly behind him. The house felt still again, different than before, fuller somehow. I looked around, expecting the silence to echo like it always did. But it didn't, for the first time in a while. Quiet felt like peace instead of punishment. I made myself a cup of tea, watching the steam twist upward in the pale morning light. It smelled of calm. Somewhere outside, a car passed and faded into distance. I thought about how quickly, just a walk home, had turned into something else, not chaos, not danger, but a small rebellion against isolation. A reminder that connection, when offered honestly, doesn't always come dressed the way you expect. I opened my phone and stared at the blank message screen for a second before typing, "Thank you for last night." Then stopped before sending, "Maybe not yet." Some stories need to rest before you let them turn into more. The tea cooled beside me. The clock ticked quietly, and the morning came fully to life, and just before I stood up, I whispered to the stillness, half to myself, half to the ghosts of the night, I guess I wasn't as alone as I thought. Before you go, if this story made you linger for even a moment, tap that like button. It helps this tiny storytelling space keep breathing. And if you're already subscribed, thank you for always showing up. You're part of why these nights turn into stories worth telling. Until next time, keep the lights on low, and listen to the quiet when it tries to speak back.